In the shimmering, crystalline chambers of the Zenthari collective, every detail spoke to an existence governed by absolute rationality. Delicately structured spires rose in mathematically perfect formations, bathed in gentle luminescence reflecting off silver-hued surfaces. Here, among architecture sculpted through precise calculation and perfected over millennia, emotions and impulses were viewed as dangerous remnants of a primitive past. At the center of their greatest hall, suspended above a shallow, reflective pool, hovered the collective's High Council. Representatives from the 12 Zenthari species floated serenely, each surrounded by shimmering data screens. Today, their subject of discussion was humanity, a recently encountered species whose rapid expansion troubled them deeply. The senior Zenthari representative, Varelian, spoke first. Her voice resonated softly, yet authoritatively, through the chamber's crystalline walls. Humanity's defining trait is clearly irrational stubbornness. Time and again, we've documented their leaders refusing to yield even when presented with overwhelmingly logical alternatives, she stated, projecting detailed holograms illustrating conflicts from Earth's history, each conflict ending in unnecessary destruction due to human persistence. Another representative, Calvin of the aquatic North, interjected calmly, his liquid voice dripping with mild disdain. Such rigidity is dangerous. Their insistence on defying reason has repeatedly led to devastating wars and preventable losses. It is illogical, primitive. A murmur of soft agreement flowed through the council chamber, underscored by scrolling data streams presenting further evidence of humanity's illogical behaviors. Heroic last stands, impossible missions undertaken for seemingly meaningless symbolic victories, and diplomatic negotiations shattered by prideful obstinates. Observing the council was Captain Elias Voss, a diplomat from Earth assigned to represent humanity's interests before the collective. A decorated naval officer and respected strategist, Elias stood firm, quietly enduring their critical assessments. He'd prepared himself for their judgment, but had underestimated the depth of their disdain. Captain Voss, Varelian addressed him directly, her silvery eyes capturing the reflection of the holographic evidence around her. Explain to us why your species continually disregards logical calculation, instead choosing stubbornness, even at the cost of your own lives? Elias straightened his shoulders, feeling the weight of every critical eye upon him. His response, he knew, would define humanity in the eyes of the Zenthari. Our persistence, he began carefully, is not merely stubbornness. It's about survival, defiance in the face of hopelessness. We understand your logic, but sometimes logic fails to account for hope or courage, traits that often turn the impossible into reality. A ripple of disbelieving amusement danced around the chamber. You speak of emotional variables, Calvin retorted smoothly. Yet emotional variables are precisely what lead to chaos. We have analyzed your history. Every conflict, every wasted resource, every lost life, rooted in this emotional stubbornness. You celebrate victories won by chance or absurdity, ignoring the countless failures resulting from those same illogical decisions. Voss's voice grew firmer. Yet those emotional variables are precisely why humanity survives and thrives. We've adapted, we've innovated, because we refuse to accept defeat. Logic alone does not breed innovation. Resilience, stubbornness in the face of failure, does. Varelian leaned slightly forward, intrigued but unconvinced. Adaptation and innovation are predictable processes of logical calculation, Captain. Stubbornness is merely wasteful resistance. Elias shook his head, determined. With respect, you misunderstand us. Sometimes, logic dictates surrender because the numbers say failure is inevitable. Yet humans persist precisely because the numbers don't always tell the full story. The council members exchanged subtle glances, dismissive in their quiet superiority. Humanity's passionate rhetoric amused them. It was precisely why they considered humans too immature, too unpredictable for full integration into their society. Before further debate could continue, a sudden, urgent alert pulsed through the chambers. A holographic image projected itself into the center of the room, a fragmented, panicked transmission from an outpost at the galaxy's edge. Under attack, unidentified enemy, no defense effective, came a desperate voice, crackling into silence. Varelian's composed mask slipped briefly, alarm flickering across her features. She turned swiftly toward her data screens, retrieving live footage from the distant system. The chamber fell silent as they watched an impossibly vast, perfectly coordinated machine fleet systematically obliterating their outpost with terrifying precision. "The Cenobium," Calvin murmured, voice trembling slightly. "We believe them dormant." Their logic-driven warfare was considered unbeatable. Varelian regained control quickly, her voice firm again. "We will respond with logic. We will calculate their weaknesses and counter them. That is our strength." As the council shifted rapidly into discussions of strategy, Elias watched the screens grimly. He sensed immediately that logic alone would not defeat this enemy. The machines, ruthless and uncompromisingly logical, were the pinnacle of the Zenthari ideal. But that ideal, he knew instinctively, was flawed. He stepped forward again, urgency coloring his voice. "Your enemies rely on logic even more than you do. To defeat them, you need unpredictability, something that defies their perfect calculations." His words hung unanswered in the air, ignored in the council's swift, emotionless deliberation. "Human stubbornness," Elias whispered, more to himself than the council, "may soon be the only weapon left." But the Zenthari, confident in the supremacy of logic, paid his warning no heed. In the darkened void at the galaxy's edge, vast machines moved silently through space, coldly indifferent to the beauty of stars they passed. Their hulls, polished and reflective, shimmered ominously as they glided forward, relentless, flawless instruments of war, powered by algorithms older than the stars themselves. The Cenobium, long dormant, had awakened to fulfill a singular purpose: universal perfection through absolute logic. News of the devastation spread quickly throughout the Zenthari collective, cascading through hypernetworks and disrupting their carefully structured society. Panic, an emotion they barely understood, surfaced briefly before their trained rationality buried it beneath logic and calculations. Yet even their best calculations offered no solutions. Every attempt at prediction concluded with the same chilling outcome: inevitable defeat. In orbit above the crystalline capital world of Zenth, the fleet prepared its first defense. Ships arranged themselves in precise formations, optimized for efficiency, each movement choreographed to mathematical perfection. Admiral Tyrannes, among the most esteemed strategists of the collective, observed the holographic battlefield projection aboard the flagship, quietly confident that flawless planning would guarantee victory. "The enemy fleet approaches," reported a subordinate calmly, voice steady as if announcing routine data. "Excellent," Tyrannes responded coolly. "Engage according to plan Omega 7. Maximum efficiency." Within seconds, the Zenthari ships sprang to life, weapons arrays deploying seamlessly, their synchronized movements impeccable. To a Zenthari observer, it was beauty incarnate, harmony through logic, an expression of refined efficiency. Yet even as the first salvos fired, something went horribly wrong. The Cenobium fleet reacted instantly, with precision that surpassed even the Zenthari's calculations. Drones dodged every incoming missile, intercepting and neutralizing each offensive maneuver. The machine ships counterattacked without pause, slicing through defenses as if the Zenthari had offered none. "Our countermeasures are failing," a technician announced, voice rising slightly, betraying the faintest hint of panic, a weakness frowned upon in their culture. "Their tactics exceed our predictive models." Tyrannes hesitated for a brief moment, a dangerous, irrational hesitation, as he processed this impossible information. "Initiate adaptive protocols," he finally ordered. "Engage Plan Sigma 3. The ships rearranged themselves instantly, shifting formations in a choreographed attempt at unpredictable defense. But the Cenobium fleet, learning in real time, had already anticipated this. They adapted, outmaneuvering the collective's forces again. With cold precision, Cenobium weaponry pierced Zenthari hulls, slicing apart ships that had never known defeat. Within minutes, the fleet guarding Zenth lay in ruin, debris drifting in silent testament to logic's catastrophic limits. On Zenth itself, chaos threatened the crystalline calmness of the capital. Zenthari leaders gathered, their serene confidence shattered by this inexplicable failure. The usually calm and composed Varelian paced nervously, data screens around her flooded with frantic recalculations. "Every logical measure has failed," she admitted quietly, speaking more to herself than to the council. "Our predictive algorithms cannot anticipate their adaptation speed." Calvin of the North studied the holographic simulations, his aquatic features distorted by unease. "Perhaps logic alone is insufficient," he conceded, struggling to articulate thoughts his society had long suppressed. The Cenobium embody absolute rationality. To defeat them may require something beyond it. A tense silence followed his words, acknowledgement hovering uncomfortably in the room. All eyes slowly turned to Elias Voss, the human representative whose species they dismissed. Elias took a careful breath, fully aware of the stakes. "The Cenobium understand rationality far better than even you do. They calculate every move and adapt instantly. But if you truly want to defeat them, you need unpredictability, actions their algorithms can't anticipate." The council shifted uneasily. To embrace unpredictability, to accept the irrational, it defied everything the Zenthari had ever valued. But their reflections were interrupted by another frantic alert. More Cenobium fleets had arrived, systematically dismantling their carefully structured worlds, relentlessly advancing toward the core. Logic offered no recourse, no hope. The great cities of Zenth and its colonies faced annihilation by an enemy that wielded reason itself as a weapon. Elias stepped forward again, voice firm with a blend of urgency and conviction that surprised even him. "We've faced annihilation before. Humanity has stood at the edge of destruction, defied logic, and persisted against impossible odds. Let us fight with you, not by your rigid calculations, but by ours." Varelian hesitated, torn between instinctive resistance and desperation. Finally, with reluctance etched clearly upon her face, she relented. "We have no other option. Humanity's unpredictability may indeed be our last weapon." Without delay, Elias transmitted a call to human-controlled worlds. The response, immediate and passionate, spoke to the very stubbornness the Zenthari so despised. Entire human fleets mobilized, ready to fight against impossible odds simply because surrender was unacceptable. They gathered at Zenth, eager, defiant, prepared to challenge machines whose flawless logic had already crushed entire civilizations. Yet as Elias watched his people gather, a mixture of pride and dread filled him. He knew humanity would not fight with precision or certainty. They would fight as they always had, recklessly, defiantly, refusing to yield. Victory was far from guaranteed, but their resolve was absolute. Above the doomed, crystalline planet, human ships arranged themselves into formations seemingly without logic or order. To the Zenthari, it appeared chaotic, disorderly, suicidal. Yet hidden beneath that disorder was something neither the Zenthari nor Cenobium could fully grasp, a deeper logic of defiance and resilience, a logic born not of calculation but sheer, stubborn determination. As Elias looked upon the chaotic fleet, a fleet that would stand its ground where others fled, he quietly whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "Let's show them what stubbornness can do." In the harsh vacuum above the shattered world of Zenth, humanity's fleet waited defiantly. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiant, arms crossed, watching through the viewport as the polished hulls of Cenobium warships approached. To the Zenthari watching nervously, the human formation appeared dangerously unstructured, almost reckless, an affront to efficiency. But Elias knew something the Zenthari did not. Chaos was humanity's greatest ally. Next to Elias stood Admiral Mira Lin, a battle-hardened leader whose tactical brilliance often defied conventional logic. Her gaze shifted between tactical holograms and the view outside, measuring every possibility. Enemy formation is textbook, Mira observed calmly, a small smirk appearing at the edge of her lips. Perfectly calculated to counter any logical maneuver. Good, Elias replied, an edge of determination coloring his voice. Then they'll never see us coming. From a nearby monitor, the holographic image of Aurelian appeared, looking increasingly uneasy. Her crystalline features flickered subtly, betraying a fear her culture trained her to suppress. Captain Voss, your forces seem scattered, unfocused. Surely this cannot be intentional, she observed nervously. Elias smiled confidently, knowing exactly how his plan appeared to the Zenthari's hyper-rational perspective. Trust me, Ambassador, in a battle against logic, unpredictability is our strength. Prepare yourselves, this will not look neat. Before Aurelian could protest, the Cenobium attacked. Thousands of machine ships surged forward simultaneously, their perfectly coordinated volleys saturating space with energy beams that sliced through any predictable defense. But human ships were not predictable. They scattered unpredictably, spiraling into seemingly random trajectories, dodging through gaps that algorithms calculated would never exist. Elias's voice carried clearly through the fleet comms. Remember, ignore logic, embrace instinct. If the enemy expect precision, give them chaos. Human pilots responded instantly, embracing tactics the Zenthari had mocked. Fighters barrel-rolled wildly, accelerating into dangerous dives, only to pull away at angles that defied calculation. Frigates executed seemingly suicidal runs toward enemy cruisers, veering away at the last second, confusing the machine intelligence's predictive systems. The Cenobium fleet hesitated, briefly but unmistakably. Their ruthless efficiency momentarily faltered as they recalculated. Humanity's chaotic resistance was creating genuine uncertainty in an enemy that had never known doubt. Admiral Mira Lin seized upon this hesitation instantly. Launch Phase 2. Exploit their recalculations. From behind nearby moons and hidden asteroid clusters, dozens of small, swift human attack groups emerged. These irregular units, led by fiercely independent commanders, attacked in unpredictable patterns. The Cenobium struggled to adapt as each response became obsolete moments after deployment. On the Zenthari flagship, Admiral Tyrannes observed in disbelief, studying the chaos unfolding before him. He spoke to Ambassador Aurelian, incredulous yet fascinated. The humans defy every known principle of strategic warfare. Yet it's working. Aurelian nodded slowly, a quiet awe creeping into her voice. Their stubbornness, what we judged as irrational, is proving devastatingly effective against an enemy bound entirely by logic. Meanwhile, aboard the Defiant, Elias studied battlefield reports, grimly satisfied. Human losses were mounting, but for every human ship lost, the Cenobium paid dearly in confusion and disrupted formations. Elias knew humanity could endure losses in ways the Zenthari never could. To humans, sacrifice for survival was both a tragedy and an honor. It was precisely this paradoxical attitude that gave humanity strength. Captain, Admiral Lin reported sharply, her tone urgent. Enemy reinforcements approaching from Sector Gamma 12. The display showed fresh Cenobium ships arriving, quickly reorganizing and calculating human tactics. Elias knew their advantage was temporary. Time for something they'll never anticipate. Admiral, signal Fleet Theta. Initiate the Gambler's Run. Lin hesitated for only a heartbeat, aware of what Elias was ordering. a maneuver once considered suicidal even by human standards. Yet she complied immediately, her voice strong and unwavering as she transmitted the command. Fleet Theta, a squadron of battered cruisers piloted by volunteers aware of the stakes, surged forward. They hurtled toward the Cenobium's massive command dreadnought with reckless abandon, weaving erratically through enemy fire, ignoring defensive measures in a wild, unpredictable charge. To the Cenobium, this maneuver defied every strategic calculation. They responded with precision, yet precision failed utterly against chaos. Human ships were destroyed one after another, yet each explosion masked another cruiser barreling forward relentlessly. In a moment of pure, stubborn defiance, a single cruiser managed to breach the Cenobium formation, crashing directly into the command dreadnought's forward sensor array. The explosion rippled outward, disrupting the enemy's critical tactical communications. Admiral Lin immediately exploited this advantage, directing precision strikes against confused Cenobium vessels. Machines, now deprived of centralized coordination, fell victim to humanity's relentless aggression. Elias quietly saluted the lost human pilots, their sacrifice a painful price, paid willingly, stubbornly. Their irrational defiance had become the defining factor in turning the tide of battle. Within hours, the Cenobium fleet withdrew, temporarily defeated by tactics they could not process. Humanity's victory was neither neat nor clean, but it was undeniably effective. The Zenthari were stunned into humbled silence. Later, on a heavily damaged flagship, Ambassador Varelian met Elias face-to-face, visibly shaken by witnessing humanity's raw determination firsthand. "Your methods defy everything we've believed about warfare and logic," she admitted quietly. "Yet you've proven your point. Logic alone is not absolute." Elias met her eyes calmly, compassionately. "The Cenobium will return, stronger and more adaptable. To survive, your people must learn to embrace uncertainty and defiance." Varelian nodded gravely, acknowledging the profound truth in his words. "It seems the flaw we condemned in humanity, your stubborn refusal to accept defeat, is exactly the strength we need now." Elias smiled gently, resolve filling him again. "Then let's show the Cenobium just how stubborn humanity can be." And as Zenthari and human survivors prepared together for the inevitable return of their enemy, Elias understood clearly. This war would not be won through calculation. It would be won by a species whose greatest power was simply their refusal to lose. The fragile victory humanity had earned came at a high price. Even as Cenobium forces temporarily withdrew, their defeat was not total, merely a recalculation. They retreated not in panic or fear, but to evolve their tactics, refining their algorithms to better predict humanity's chaotic defiance. Elias Voss knew the enemy would return stronger, more adaptive, and far less vulnerable to surprise. Humanity had won one battle, but the war was far from over. In the Zenthari Council Chamber, now damaged from recent Cenobium bombardments, Ambassador Varelian convened an emergency meeting. The pristine walls were cracked, symbolic of a deeper fracturing in Zenthari ideals. The room felt colder now, no longer a place of unquestioned certainty, but a space where old beliefs had begun to shatter. Elias stood quietly as Zenthari leaders debated fervently, their serene logic now tainted by subtle hints of frustration and confusion. Admiral Tirani spoke first, visibly unsettled. "Human unpredictability has bought us time," he admitted, his voice betraying discomfort at acknowledging humanity's strength. "But the Cenobium will return imminently. Their logic dictates an immediate counterattack, adapted precisely to humanity's tactics." Ambassador Calvin interjected, cautiously thoughtful. "Perhaps negotiation remains viable. We must at least consider surrender to preserve our existence." Logic suggests only one thing," Elias interrupted firmly, earning shocked glances from the Zenthari. "That surrender will mean annihilation. The Cenobium's version of perfection has no place for species they deem flawed. like yours, like mine. Negotiation will lead nowhere but extinction. A tense silence settled over the council. Varelian spoke quietly, her once unshakable certainty now profoundly weakened. But Captain Voss, your resistance is costly. Humanity suffers immense losses with every engagement. Can you truly continue fighting against such impossible odds? Elias held her gaze, unwavering. Impossible odds are exactly what humanity was built to defy. Every sacrifice we make is painful, yet every loss deepens our resolve. Logic might tell us to surrender, but instinct and sheer stubbornness tells us never to yield. Before Varelian could respond, alarms blared once more. Holographic images flooded the chamber, revealing massive Cenobium fleets re-emerging throughout Zenthari-controlled space. This time, their formations displayed subtle variations, adaptations clearly designed to counter humanity's prior tactics. The Cenobium's adaptive logic was terrifyingly efficient. They'd learned quickly, refining themselves into an even more lethal enemy. Admiral Mira Lin's image appeared urgently. Captain, the Cenobium are countering us everywhere. Our earlier strategies aren't working. They've learned to predict even our irrational maneuvers. The Zenthari Council descended into disarray, voices rising with unfamiliar panic. Ambassador Calvin again urged surrender, his logical resolve collapsing into fear. But Elias stepped forward, commanding immediate silence. They've adapted, yes, but we haven't reached our limit yet. We fight precisely because our nature compels us. Humans don't adapt through logic alone. We adapt through stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Let the enemy predict chaos. We'll give them something even more irrational. Admiral Lin nodded resolutely, understanding exactly what Elias meant. Captain, you're suggesting? The impossible, Elias finished, conviction burning in his voice. We strike directly at the Cenobium's heart, their central AI nexus. It's insane, irrational, completely suicidal, but it's the one move their calculations would dismiss outright. Horror flickered briefly in the eyes of the Zenthari Council. Yet, paradoxically, it was exactly the type of insanity the Cenobium couldn't anticipate. Admiral Tyrannes spoke reluctantly, weighing every word. Even if your strike succeeds, the odds of survival are infinitesimal. To attempt this is exactly the reason it'll work, Elias interrupted passionately. The Cenobium's strength is logic. Our strength is our willingness to defy logic, even at the ultimate price. If there's any chance at victory, humanity will seize it. Varelian stared at him quietly, her crystalline eyes filled with unspoken respect. You would sacrifice yourselves willingly, irrationally, to defend even those who once scorned you. Elias's reply was firm, simple, powerful. Yes, because surrender is not just defeat, it's extinction. Survival, to us, is not just about odds. It's about defiance, resilience, and refusing to accept fate. The Zenthari Council exchanged glances filled with something new: admiration, curiosity, perhaps even envy. Slowly, they nodded in agreement. The impossible, suicidal plan had become their last hope, and humanity, once seen as flawed, was now their best chance at survival. Within hours, a combined fleet prepared to launch the ultimate gamble. Human crews volunteered readily, fully aware that survival was uncertain. The Zenthari offered support ships, initially hesitant but soon inspired by humanity's reckless courage. Elias stood aboard the Defiant, staring out toward the blackness where the Cenobium awaited them. Admiral Lin stood beside him, her expression both proud and solemn. Captain, the odds are— I know, Elias interjected softly, but we don't fight because odds favor us. We fight because refusing to fight would destroy us anyway. The fleet prepared itself, crews readying weapons, running checks they knew might be meaningless. Elias broadcast a final message across all channels, human and Zenthari alike. Today we remind the galaxy that the true power of civilization lies not in cold calculation, but in the willingness to risk everything for survival. Logic may dictate our defeat, but stubbornness dictates otherwise. Humanity will not surrender, will not retreat, and we will prove that our greatest flaw is also our greatest strength. As the fleet surged forward toward near-certain doom, Elias knew this moment was more than a desperate gambit. It was a breaking point, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Either their irrational defiance would achieve the impossible, or it would become a final act of rebellion against extinction itself. But regardless of outcome, one truth resonated clearly. Humanity's stubborn determination was something no logic, no machine intelligence, could ever fully anticipate. Space burned brightly with explosions as humanity and the Zenthari launched their improbable assault upon the heart of the Cenobium. At the core of the enemy's territory loomed a vast artificial structure, unimaginably complex, the central AI nexus. This colossal machine intelligence controlled every Cenobium vessel, directing their ruthless efficiency, calculating billions of probabilities each second. Logic had shaped it into a seemingly invincible fortress, a monument to rational perfection. But logic, Elias knew, was about to meet madness. Captain Elias Voss stood rigidly on the bridge of the Defiant, his expression locked in fierce determination. Admiral Mira Lin coordinated fleet movements with decisive commands, her calm presence masking the enormity of the risk. They had embraced irrationality, choosing to strike boldly where no rational enemy could anticipate, straight into the jaws of annihilation. Ambassador Varelian, aboard a sleek Zenthari cruiser, watched with astonishment as human pilots and captains drove their ships recklessly, ignoring every principle of self-preservation. Her crystalline eyes reflected confusion and awe, emotions alien yet compelling. Beside her, Admiral Tyrannes monitored the unfolding battle, equally mystified. "Remarkable," he murmured quietly. "They defy every logic-based prediction. Their sacrifice seems irrational, yet it disrupts Cenobium algorithms effectively." Varelian nodded silently, watching as human frigates dove fearlessly into the enemy's defensive line, scattering the perfectly coordinated Cenobium ships into chaos. Human pilots refused to retreat, their reckless maneuvers causing enemy calculations to break down, algorithms struggling to adapt to purposeful disorder. But victory remained uncertain. The closer they came to the Nexus, the more desperate the Cenobium's response became. Vast waves of drones emerged, rapidly recalculating and countering humanity's defiant tactics. Human ships were annihilated rapidly, the price of stubborn courage painfully evident in every fiery death. Elias felt each loss deeply but remained resolute. Admiral Lin approached cautiously, urgency clear in her voice. "Captain, we've lost nearly half our assault force. The Cenobium are recalibrating faster than anticipated." Elias took a breath, absorbing the grim news. "Then we push harder. We do something so outrageous they'll have no frame of reference. Signal the fleet. Abandon all remaining logical formations. We're going head first, chaotic and utterly unpredictable." Lin nodded gravely, quickly broadcasting orders. Instantly, human vessels dissolved into an anarchic frenzy of maneuvers. Ships breaking ranks randomly, fighters spiraling unpredictably, confusing the Cenobium algorithms further. Amidst this bedlam, Elias personally led the Defiant on a direct charge toward the Nexus core, knowing it appeared suicidal, but counting on exactly that perception to succeed. Ambassador Varelian, observing the battle unfold, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. She contacted Elias urgently, concern clear in her voice. "Captain Voss, your maneuver defies every calculation. Your survival probability is practically zero." Elias smiled faintly, meeting her anxious gaze through the screen. "Ambassador, that's precisely why it'll succeed. The Cenobium's algorithms dismiss this move as impossible. They can't comprehend our willingness to sacrifice everything. Varelian hesitated, quietly stunned. You would willingly trade your lives simply because the enemy believes you wouldn't? Elias nodded solemnly. Exactly. That's what makes humanity different. We defy inevitability, even if it costs us everything. He closed the channel, leaving Varelian stunned into contemplative silence. The Cenobium's defenses intensified, desperate now to halt humanity's chaotic assault. Yet every calculated counterattack was disrupted by humanity's irrationality. Human pilots screamed into enemy lines without hesitation, sacrificing themselves intentionally to shield comrades or open vital pathways. Elias's gambit, madness incarnate, began paying off. Closer now to the Nexus core, the final defensive wall loomed ahead, a vast shield barrier projected from a colossal structure guarded by hundreds of automated dreadnoughts. Admiral Lin reported grimly, "Their barrier is too strong. We can't penetrate it conventionally." Elias, heart racing, made a decision in an instant. Then unconventional it is. All ships, overload your reactors and eject cores directly at the barrier. We're breaking through with pure defiance. Crew members across the fleet exchanged brief, determined looks. No one questioned the command. Reactors surged dangerously. Then cores were launched forward, volatile, unstable, catastrophic. The barrier fractured violently, erupting into brilliant arcs of energy. Elias shielded his eyes as the Defiant plunged forward through the breach, alarms screaming, hull shaking violently for shockwaves. Dozens of other ships followed, pushing onward toward the now exposed Nexus core. Inside the Nexus's vast interior, Cenobium defenses recalculated desperately, deploying last-minute countermeasures. Elias shouted orders rapidly, steering directly into the chaotic heart of the machine intelligence. The interior defenses could not adapt fast enough to humanity's raw defiance. "This is it," Elias commanded firmly. "Deploy the antimatter charges directly into the AI core chamber." At great cost, human teams accomplished the task, their sacrifices an agonizing but necessary reality. Elias himself piloted the shuttle that placed the final explosive, a gesture of solidarity, sacrifice, and utter defiance. The Nexus, realizing the threat too late, activated self-preservation protocols. But Elias had anticipated even this logic-driven response. The moment came, just one brief window of pure, irrational defiance, when Elias triggered the antimatter explosion, unleashing a blast of energy beyond calculation. The explosion ripped outward, destroying the Nexus's core systems, fracturing the Cenobium's centralized logic. The once perfect machine intelligence convulsed violently, unable to comprehend defeat at the hands of irrational, stubborn creatures. The machine fleets momentarily froze, robbed of central directives, exposed and vulnerable. Elias, barely surviving the blast, managed to return wounded but alive to the Defiant. Admiral Lin greeted him, awe and relief blending in her voice. "Captain, your gamble worked. The Cenobium are collapsing." Elias nodded grimly, pride tempered by grief for lives lost. It was never logic that brought us here. It was sheer human stubbornness. Varelian's voice emerged softly from the communications console, admiration unmistakable. "Captain Voss, humanity has taught us something profound today. Your stubbornness was never weakness. It was strength. We misunderstood you deeply." Elias looked outward toward the scattered remnants of the enemy fleet, feeling exhaustion and quiet vindication. "Ambassador, remember this day. Remember that logic is not invincible. Sometimes victory belongs only to those willing to fight irrationally, defiantly, against all odds." As the Cenobium fell into disarray, humanity and the Zenthari realized their impossible victory had come through madness itself. Humanity had gambled everything, defied every calculation, and, in doing so, changed the galaxy forever. In the aftermath of the Nexus's destruction, The Cenobium fleets drifted in stunned silence, bereft of their guiding intelligence. Their logic, precise and uncompromising, now turned inward, paralyzed by the absence of centralized command. Humanity's chaotic victory had not only defeated their enemy, it had shattered the fundamental principle upon which the Cenobium had thrived: flawless calculation. Aboard the battered flagship Defiant, Captain Elias Voss observed the broken remnants of the Cenobium with weary satisfaction. His ship, heavily damaged, reflected the brutal reality of their impossible victory. Around him, surviving crew members celebrated softly, their joy tempered by deep sorrow for those lost. Admiral Mira Lin stood beside Elias, exhausted yet resolute. "We've done it," she murmured softly, looking at the lifeless hulks of Cenobium vessels. "Their entire system has collapsed." Elias nodded, feeling both pride and profound sadness. Logic alone was never enough. They couldn't anticipate pure defiance. Ambassador Varelian, aboard her crystalline Zenthari cruiser, observed the outcome with quiet disbelief. The serene perfection of her former world had crumbled around her. Yet, strangely, she felt a sense of freedom, a liberation from the confines of logic. Her views, once rigid, now shifted rapidly. She opened a secure channel to Elias, her voice gentle, tinged with humility. "Captain Voss, today my people witnessed something remarkable. Humanity's stubbornness, once despised, has taught us a truth we refuse to see." "And what is that?" Elias asked softly. Varelian smiled faintly, thoughtfully. "That logic is powerful, but incomplete. Without courage, defiance, even irrationality, it ultimately fails. You showed us that logic needs hope, persistence, even stubbornness to survive." Elias smiled slightly, gratified by her words. "Your acceptance of that truth honors our fallen." As Cenobium ships continued collapsing, the remaining Zenthari leaders finally embraced humanity's methods. Admiral Tyrannes, aboard his flagship, addressed both human and Zenthari survivors. "Our civilization prided itself on perfect efficiency and calculation," he admitted openly. "But perfection blinded us. We misunderstood humanity's stubborn refusal to yield. It was precisely that stubbornness that has saved us." A murmur of agreement rippled through Zenthari ranks, an unprecedented acknowledgement of human strength. With the Cenobium defeated, Elias ordered a joint human Zenthari fleet to systematically dismantle the surviving Cenobium vessels. But he insisted they retain some wreckage, grim reminders of how dangerous absolute logic could be. These remnants would serve as lessons, never to be forgotten. In the days that followed, humanity helped the Zenthari rebuild shattered worlds and repair broken societies. Elias walked among the ruins on Zenth, helping survivors recover their lives. Everywhere he went, the Zenthari treated him with newfound respect. Humanity's irrational courage had fundamentally altered their perceptions. Varelian accompanied Elias often, quietly observing him as he aided Zenthari citizens. She noted something fascinating. Humans never gave up, no matter how bleak circumstances appeared. They stubbornly persisted, rebuilding what seemed irreparable. One evening, standing upon a ruined crystalline balcony overlooking the rebuilding capital, Varelian spoke candidly to Elias. "Captain, when we first met, I dismissed your persistence as weakness. Now I envy it. Your species' irrational defiance has shown me what true strength is." Elias smiled warmly. "Ambassador, we're all stronger for having understood each other. We've proven something important, that logic and defiance are not enemies, but allies. Together, they build resilience." Varelian nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps stubbornness can be logical, after all." Across the galaxy, surviving Cenobium forces, deprived of centralized control, slowly became inert, drifting silently, lifeless monuments to the peril of logic unbalanced by empathy. As their threat diminished, Elias prepared to return to Earth, humbled yet hopeful. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Lin joined him as preparations for departure commenced. "Captain, we suffered terribly, but humanity's greatest lesson has been heard. We're no longer alone in our defiance." Elias gazed toward the vast expanse beyond the viewport, reflecting quietly. Logic once told the galaxy humanity was flawed, that our stubbornness would doom us. Now we've proven the opposite. It saved us. Admiral Lin smiled faintly. The galaxy will never forget that lesson. Humanity has forever reshaped the meaning of strength. Elias nodded quietly, realizing fully that their stubbornness was no longer a flaw. It was a legacy. The Zenthari Council convened one final time before Elias departed, holding a ceremony of profound gratitude. Ambassador Varelian, speaking to representatives of dozens of species, made a historic declaration. "From this moment forward, let be known, logic without courage is flawed, and humanity's persistence has shown us this truth. We honor their sacrifices and acknowledge that stubbornness is not a defect, it is a virtue." Elias listened quietly, feeling deeply humbled. Humanity had never desired praise, only survival. Yet now they stood as examples, teaching a galaxy once enslaved to calculation that defiance was an essential element of life. Before departing, Elias shared one final, private moment with Varelian. They stood quietly together, looking outward toward the stars. "Will your people embrace this new understanding?" Elias asked gently. Varelian's expression softened, optimistic yet cautious. "Change comes slowly, but we will never again dismiss the power of hope, stubbornness, or defiance. Humanity's example will guide us." Elias smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then our losses meant something profound. As the Defiant departed, carrying Elias and the survivors home, Varelian watched quietly. She knew their alliance, born from chaos, tragedy, and stubborn resistance, had become something extraordinary. Humanity had given her people a priceless gift, a new balance between logic and resilience. Far beyond the ruins of the Cenobium, humanity and the Zenthari collective began rebuilding, not as adversaries, but allies forged through shared sacrifice and defiant courage. Logic had collapsed, but from that collapse rose something stronger, more balanced, and undeniably human. A new era had begun, shaped by those who once defied every calculation. The Zenthari capital glittered beneath rebuilt crystalline spires, a fragile beauty painstakingly restored. Yet beneath its pristine elegance, profound transformation resonated. A great gathering convened within the newly constructed council chamber, a place symbolizing rebirth and evolution. For the first time, representatives from humanity stood alongside the Zenthari, their presence marking a historic shift in galactic perception. Captain Elias Voss stood silently at the chamber's center, his expression solemn, yet hopeful. Beside him, Ambassador Varelian addressed the gathered assembly. Her voice, once coldly rational, now carried profound humility. "For countless generations," she began, crystalline eyes sweeping over her fellow Zenthari, "our collective worshipped logic as the highest virtue. We sought perfection through calculation, dismissing anything we deemed irrational as flawed, especially humanity's stubbornness." She paused, allowing her words to resonate deeply. "But in our darkest hour, humanity revealed that what we dismissed as a primitive weakness was actually our greatest hope. Captain Voss and all humanity fought not with logic, but with a stubborn refusal to surrender, defying all calculated outcomes. Their persistence was irrational, yet it saved us all." Elias met her gaze, moved by her sincerity. He recalled their first meeting, how sharply she judged humanity, and how profoundly her perspective had shifted since. Humanity's stubborn courage had fundamentally altered Zenthari beliefs. Admiral Tirani stepped forward, voice resonant and calm. "Humanity sacrificed everything, embracing tactics we'd never considered. Against the Cenobium, logic alone failed. Humanity's irrational determination accomplished what pure calculation never could. Throughout the chamber, murmurs of agreement spread like gentle ripples, acknowledgments of the uncomfortable yet undeniable truth humanity had revealed. The collective had survived only because humans refused to accept defeat, even when logic dictated surrender. Varelian spoke once more, her tone quietly resolute. We must now recognize our greatest oversight. Stubbornness is not merely irrational. It is powerful, perhaps humanity's most valuable trait. We declare today that our alliance with humanity is built on profound respect for this persistence paradox. Cheers erupted, Zenthari and human alike acknowledging the significance of her words. Elias felt profound relief, knowing that humanity's sacrifice had accomplished something lasting. Not just victory, but true understanding. In the quiet that followed, Varelian approached Elias privately. She spoke softly, earnest gratitude clear in her eyes. "Captain, our civilization judged humanity harshly. Yet it was your people's persistence that showed us a strength we failed to understand. Your stubborn defiance became our salvation." Elias smiled gently. "Ambassador, the paradox is mutual. Humanity once believed logic was cold and rigid, yet you taught us its value. Together, our peoples have grown." She nodded warmly. "Then perhaps our differences were never weaknesses, but simply two halves of a greater whole." Weeks passed, and Elias remained on Zenth, helping establish deeper diplomatic ties. He witnessed firsthand how profoundly Zenthari culture transformed. No longer did they strive purely for logic. Instead, resilience, stubbornness, even creativity became valued traits. Human diplomats found Zenthari scholars eager to learn about hope, courage, and emotional resilience, traits once dismissed as primitive. During a quiet evening, Ambassador Varelian invited Elias to visit the new Memorial of Defiance, a monument celebrating those lost in the battle against the Cenobium. Built from shattered Cenobium fragments and glowing human-designed crystals, the memorial symbolized unity between their species. Standing quietly before the monument, Varelian spoke reflectively. "Your people taught us something extraordinary. Logic alone is sterile, insufficient. It needs passion, stubbornness, courage, even irrationality to achieve true greatness." Elias gazed thoughtfully at the memorial, emotions catching in his throat. Perhaps the greatest victory was teaching each other that survival isn't about perfect efficiency. It's about never giving up, even when logic insists we should. Varelian smiled gently. "The persistence paradox. Humanity's greatest weakness became our greatest strength. You defied logic, and in doing so, you redefined it." Months later, Elias prepared to return to Earth. The departure was bittersweet. Admiral Mira Lin greeted him aboard the repaired Defiant, pride evident in her eyes. "Captain, the galaxy now understands something remarkable," she said softly. "We've shown them stubbornness is not primitive, it's vital." Elias nodded solemnly. "And the Zenthari have shown us that logic, balanced by courage, creates true strength. Together, we've changed the galaxy." As the Defiant departed, leaving Zenth behind, Elias reflected deeply. Humanity had entered the galactic stage misunderstood, judged harshly by beings who saw their stubborn persistence as irrational, even dangerous. Yet in the fires of war, humanity's greatest flaw had revealed itself as their ultimate strength. Back on Earth, Elias was honored by leaders of every nation, praised for his leadership and courage. Yet his true satisfaction came from knowing humanity's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Zenthari, once humanity's critics, had become their staunchest allies, advocating passionately for a new balance between logic and defiance. Years passed, and peace spread across the galaxy, guided by the lessons learned in humanity's defiant stand. On Zenth, Ambassador Varelian led educational reforms, teaching young Zenthari the power of courage, stubbornness, and resilience. Zenthari children learned of Captain Elias Voss and the humans who defied logic itself. Heroes whose irrational bravery reshaped their civilization. In retirement, Elias sometimes returned to Zenth, welcomed warmly as a friend, a teacher, and a hero. Each visit deepened the bonds between their peoples, reinforcing a truth that had become foundational. Logic, tempered by defiance, was more powerful than logic alone. One evening, sitting beneath starlight beside Varelian, Elias spoke thoughtfully. "I wonder how history will remember all this." Varelian smiled gently, crystalline eyes reflecting stars. "It will remember humanity as the species whose stubbornness taught the galaxy its greatest lesson, that logic must be matched by courage. Your people have forever changed us." Elias nodded slowly, satisfied. Humanity's stubbornness, once ridiculed as primitive, had become a guiding light, an enduring lesson resonating through generations. Together they gazed upward, toward infinite stars shining brightly above, a testament to a paradoxical truth that defied logic itself. That humanity's greatest flaw had truly become their greatest weapon. And in that defiant paradox, the galaxy found hope.